Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. More people in North Carolina are ending up in the emergency room with a sickness related to cannabis use. WRAL health reporter Grace Hayba joins me now to talk about what doctors think is behind this increase in cases of cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. Grace, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Did I pronounce that right? I think I did.
Cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome or hyperemesis syndrome, but you're close.
Okay.
Again, not a lot of people know about it, so.
Okay, so what is CHS?
So it's basically what happens when we have in our body what are called cannabinoid receptors. And so they help regulate things, or endocannabinoid receptors, and they help regulate things like pain, appetite, sleep, etc. We all have them. Cannabis use, for whatever reason, affects these receptors. And so essentially, the idea is that CHS occurs when those receptors are overloaded. And people who get sick with this and are diagnosed report nonstop nausea, vomiting, and things that they just can't control. Their appetite gets thrown all out of whack. So you're kind of seeing the connection here to these receptors that we have. And the odd thing is that people who get sick say that they only have relief from either A, using cannabis products. Again, it offers short-term relief, but then it'll come back with vengeance. And B, taking things like really hot showers. One woman that we spoke with said that she was taking hot showers 15 times every single day, and to the point where she still, to this day, months later, still has burns on her back from it. So it's this odd condition tied to cannabis use. If you're not smoking, you're not going to get diagnosed with CHS. But if you are and you suddenly are super nauseous, that's a sign that it could be this.
Okay. How did you start looking into this since it is pretty rare traditionally?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jill Fuller reached out to us. She lives in Apex, and obviously, right, recreational marijuana is not legal here in North Carolina. So she was not a smoker. She said she's never has been, but what she was doing was she would have a glass of wine most nights, and she was looking for an alternative to that. She wanted to be healthier. She knew she wasn't making the best choices for her body, so she said, I went to this store down the street from where I live. It didn't look like a traditional vape shop. She actually described it as not having like the flashing red and green lights that we see, and she thought it was a healthy store. She went inside, talked to some folks. They recommended this one type of THC gummy at first. She took it for several months, and she noticed that she was having to kind of take more and more. She started with one a night and was kind of working her way up to the point where she was taking 5 or 6 a night. And she said, well, let me go back and see if there's a different kind that I can take where I don't have to take 6 a night, right, to kind of get sleepy. And again, she still thought she was making a healthier choice than having wine. Well, it turns out that whatever brand she switched to the second time, it kind of just caused her receptors to be overloaded. She got super nauseous, couldn't figure out what was going on, had to stay home from work. Her sister ended up taking her to the emergency room, and it wasn't until she made a comment about how she was feeling and the fact that she had been taking gummies that everyone around her, the nursing staff, etc., said, oh my gosh, that's what that is. Because, again, nausea and vomiting, those are very common with a whole host of things, GI issues, etc. So it really takes someone like that saying these key things for medical staff to kind of have that light bulb moment, especially in a state like ours where marijuana use is not common. People like her aren't even aware of what they're buying, and what's in it, right? Because we don't have that regulation. So we started looking into this simply because she emailed us and said, hey, I have been sick for a while, couldn't figure out what was going on, was in the ER. I haven't been able to work for over a month. This is what it is. And that's where it all started. I did a lot of research, and the funny thing is there's limited research to read about this, especially in North Carolina. One of the few case studies I came across happened to be written or authored by a gentleman who was a physician at Duke Regional Hospital. So that's where I reached out to the Duke Health Media folks and said, hey, have you heard of this? And if so, does this person still work there? Is there somebody else we can speak with? And then that kind of led us down the track of, them also doing research on their end, finding a physician who said, absolutely, this is a real thing, and we're happy to talk about it and get the word out.
Wow. Okay. And so once you do that research and everything, how long after that was it that Jill had gotten this diagnosis?
So she reached out to us about 2 months after she had gotten her initial diagnosis, about a month and a half to 2 months after she had gotten her initial diagnosis. So that was when we first did the interview with her earlier in the summer. And then after that, I took all that information, went back, tried to find the medical data to kind of back it up, right? And then we had another interview with an emergency physician at Duke Regional, Dr. Josh Ring, and he explained, yep, like this is a real thing. We now see it on a weekly basis, if not daily. And then after that, we went back and did a second interview with Jill and her mom. And in the time since, she had moved back in with her mom, to help provide care for her, but also because her symptoms were so severe in the beginning that her doctor told her she shouldn't be living by herself. So,
wow.
At 57, she moved back in with her mom. And that's just kind of how it all unfolded. So several weeks, over a month, worth of digging and multiple shoots later, here we are with this story.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break right there and we'll be right back. Grace, before the break, you were talking about that Jill got these gummies from a shop that, she thought was pretty legit. It was, had a medical looking front to it and things like that.
Exactly.
How common are these kinds of products that she used that made her sick?
Very common. And that's, I think, part of the problem, right? With A, this condition, but B, the lack of awareness behind it is the fact that these products are all over the place. You can find them in convenience stores, the things that are named vape shops, even gas stations. There's various places that you can now find THC, CBD, gummies, oils, whatever it is, right? So many different products now have these in them. And there are varying levels, right, of potency. And so some of them are very low. You would hardly feel the effects of anything. But others have this strong effect on people, especially if you use them consistently. And so doctors say that as these products, especially A, grow in popularity, and B, just kind of the lack of regulation around them in states like ours where it's not legal, you run into this issue of people not knowing what they're buying, not knowing even one gummy in a package compared to the next one could have very different potency levels. So it all just kind of continues to feed this cycle of what am I taking, what am I really taking, and then why am I suddenly getting so sick?
So who is more prone to getting sick from this?
So it's an interesting question because we spoke with Jill Fuller, who's 57, but doctors say that they primarily see this impact young males, particularly those who are teenage years or even young 20s is the typical age frame in which they see it. And I remember saying that initial case study that I came across, that was one of the findings of it as well, was that it primarily affected young males. But here we are talking to Jill, who is approaching 60 and would not typically fit this mold, right? So it again just points to the lack of research that is available and why so much more needs to be done to fully understand this, because clearly it can affect a whole host of individuals. And another interesting thing that Dr. Ring mentioned, again, we keep talking about how Fuller bought these THC gummies, right? Well, he mentioned that it's more common that people who are sick with this say that they were smoking marijuana or ingesting it in another way, and that gummies is not typically the way that someone presents with CHS. But here we are with Jill, who had never done that, and had only taken these gummies and still wound up with the same condition. So again, just continues to emphasize and underscore just how much we don't fully understand about this and how much more research still needs to be done, especially to your point, as these products grow in popularity, more states legalize marijuana and everything that's come with that.
Right. And so what is sort of the scope of this increase that people are seeing? Are there any statistics on how much more common this is becoming?
Yeah, so in terms of the potency level itself, that's what physicians are kind of speculating is fueling this increase, because CHS was first mentioned in medical literature about 20-some years ago. So it's not new. But again, it's just not something that doctors saw very much. It was very rare, especially in a state like ours. But now, since we have seen more THC products, A, come onto market, and B, the potency level of them rise, they are seeing it more often. So this one study showed that products seized by the DEA back in 95 had less than 4% out across the board. The THC potency level was less than 4%. And as of 2022, it was nearly 17%. So that alone shows that, the common saying of, the marijuana back in the day, right, is not the same as it is today, or the products that we're having are not the same. From generation to generation, there has been a big change. And so that's why this super rare condition that maybe doctors might have seen a handful of times back in the day, they now see several times a week. So it's definitely becoming a lot more common. And again, I think it just all kind of goes back to this conversation of what are in the products that are on our shelves.
Yeah. And so for Jill, how is she doing now? Has her symptoms gotten better now that she's gotten this diagnosis and knows what may be behind it?
Yes, she is a lot better.
Good.
She definitely is. But it took her several months to get there. Like I said, when we first heard from her months ago, she was not doing as well. She even noticed that certain foods she was eating, things like broccoli even, were irritating these symptoms. And so now she's back to being able to eat her normal food diet. She's away from the brat diet that she was on for several weeks and is back to eating normal foods. And she feels a lot better. But again, she said she's never, having any of these types of gummies ever again. And her biggest point of wanting to reach out is just the lack of awareness. That was really scary for her and her family to have to go through to figure out what was making her so sick. And she just wants people to know, if you are going to have gummies or, engage in that type of usage or something like that, to know that this is a side effect. And something that we kind of talk a lot about when it comes to marijuana products specifically is we know all of the things that are tied to alcohol, right? Alcoholism and things like that, fetal alcohol syndrome. But when it comes to marijuana use, especially in a state where it's not legal, a lot of those are not as discussed as much. And so she just wants to raise awareness that, hey, if this happens, tell your doctor that you are taking gummies or whatever you are doing. Tell them all of the information that you possibly can to help them with this diagnosis, because that is one of the few things that's going to differentiate your symptoms from a whole host of other things that they may be prescribing you medication or trying to treat you for, when really CHS is at the root of it.
Right. And is there anything people can do to avoid getting sick if they're using these things?
So really the biggest thing is you shouldn't be using these on a daily basis, right? And again, you need to know what's in it. You have to do your research. You have to look into these products. And that's just the difficult thing, because these were marketed as THC gummies. She thought she knew what was in them. And then, like I said, she went and got a second type, and that turned out to be a lot stronger than what she was expecting. And these were things that were suggested to her by an employee at the store. So it really, unfortunately, right now is entirely up to the consumer. But the consumer also isn't being given all the information that they need to make a decision. So the reality is the only way to avoid getting CHS is to not have these types of products. And again, if you are, to know that if you start to experience these symptoms, the only way to feel better is to stop them entirely and to go get help.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Grace. We appreciate it. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.